I remember when I first got married, I learned super quickly like how selfish I was, like how much I wanted to do. I wanted to go play basketball. I wanted to go hang out with my friends. I wanted to go shooting or go snowboarding, do this or that.
Welcome back to the Men of Iron podcast. This month we are diving into family. It's one of our core 5 that we believe here at Men of Iron. And what's so cool about family is I think it can break into a couple different pieces, husbands, sons, fathers, just spiritual leaders, all these different pieces. But today we have an awesome opportunity to have Andy with us. Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm so glad you could make it happen. I know it was a little bit last minute, but we got everything dialed up for it. And today I really want to kind of start off first before we dive into a husband and what that looks like. I want to know who Andy is. I want our viewers to know who Andy is, kind of a little backstory, maybe about your faith, what you're currently doing, maybe a little bit about your life and what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I serve as our Next Steps Director at LCBC Lancaster City. I've been doing that for about a year now. I went through a residency program called Develop. It's just a 2-year campus leadership program where you get to pick like 2 areas of ministry. So I did adult ministry and student ministry. And I figured out very quickly that adult ministry is where I want to be because student ministry is fun, but man, it's a lot. Before that, I was in the Air Force for 3 years. I was security forces, so big change. I felt like God was calling me into ministry, had a lot of people pour into me. In the military, I quickly figured out, I was like, I really need faith in my life. I was like super lost in high school. I grew up Catholic, but actually in boot camp was like the first time where I experienced like a Christian church for the first time. And then I came to LCBC when I was 18 and absolutely loved it, got plugged in. In that time when I was 18, that's where I was truly saved. So it's been a wild journey.
That's so cool. When did you meet your wife? When did that happen?
Yeah, so I met my wife about we've been together for 5 years, been married coming up on 2 years. So it was like 6 months when I was stationed at Dover Air Force Base. So we did long distance for a little while. I met her during that time. And during that time, it was like my first time ever doing like any ministry stuff. It's like I started a young adult group at my mom's house. She helped me with that. And that's when I first met her.
So through that time, you were just talking a little bit about, a little bit lost through high school, then you kind of went to Air Force. You're like, wait a minute, I'm getting called. I feel like God's working on me a little bit.
Yep. How
did all that kind of stuff progress? Was it a tough decisions? Like that, sometimes this stuff's not easy, right? Like deciding, like making that mark in the ground, making that place in the sand. Like I'm not going to change, right? Yep. I'm going to follow God. Is that tough sometimes?
Oh, it was absolutely tough. That nudge that I felt like God wanted me to do more, but I also felt like stuck. So like I had a huge decision to make. And also, I wanted to marry my wife. I was thinking about proposing. So like in that 6 months where I was thinking about that, I had to really think about 2 things. I was like, what's God calling me towards next? And I don't think it was the Air Force. And also like what's next for me, like to prepare myself to be a husband. And so that looked like a lot of prayer, and it was really like a lot of people pouring into me to figure that out, like knowing that I have leadership capabilities that I didn't know I had, and I had people pour into me for that. And I didn't see it in myself right away. So super just blessed that happened.
Last little piece about that I loved. Who were the guys that poured into you? Like who were those like guys that you can look back now and say what he said in my life when he, made a statement or when he mentored me in a way, like who were those guys for you?
Yeah, I had 2 guys from LCBC. They're still on staff there. John Wilkinson was the first person that like trusted me with the group. I had no idea what I was doing. It was hilarious. We had like this bootleg Temu garage screen, right?
Yep.
And it was like we just pinned it to the garage door, and we would just watch like just YouTube Bible studies of like Francis Chan, and I was like, how do I ask questions about this stuff? And then from like a leadership standpoint, Josh and I was like the first person. He was like, why don't you take this young adult group and have it at church? That was like, he really poured into me. We read Empower Leadership together, different leadership books and devotionals. And it was really cool to just pick his brain. He's poured into me a lot. He was even my best man. So it was really
awesome.
Cool.
That's so cool. So as we kind of shift a little bit, knowing a little bit about you, now talking about, to be a husband. Like that's such an important role in a family.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a big role.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's a heavy responsibility sometimes. What would you say out of the gate for yourself to kind of set the framework? What's the biblical role of a husband in a family? Like where does that begin and where does that kind of start with?
Yeah, I would say I think the biggest thing is really just like leading your wife. Like in Ephesians, it talks about it talks more about the husband leading the wife than like the wife being submissive to the husband. And I think yeah, it's a super critical role. We don't see enough of that at church today, which kind of stinks, but I think we're getting there. That's why I love Men of Iron. But yeah, it looks like leading your wife in a Bible study and learning with her, growing with her, praying before meals, and honestly just doing some of the stuff that men do in the household. I think is just huge.
What are some things you kind of alluded to them a little bit right there at the end? What are some things that you're currently doing with your wife?
Yep.
That you would say man, since I've done this change has happened. Because at first I think for some of us, it's where do I start in that?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make that connection to be able to is it just maybe simple as praying? What's that look like?
Yeah, I do think the biggest thing is praying, like grabbing your spouse's hand and just praying at night, in the morning, wherever you can pray. We want to invite God into everything. Me and my wife, we do devotionals together on the Bible app. We did that literally since almost day one, which is real cool. It can look back and see over 100 done. But I really think too, it's to invest in your marriage, just like investing in your faith, you have to keep working at it. So it's you shouldn't do life alone with your spouse. You should definitely be in a group, definitely be in a Men of Iron group, but definitely be in a couples group too. I think it's also huge having a spiritual couple that's a mentor almost that you can
Mm-hmm.
look to. We have one couple that we get to ask questions about. He's actually one of the men's group leaders, which is great.
Yeah.
Mike Resch.
Yeah.
Mike Resch. And he's a teacher and his wife works in the school. So yeah, if I ever have questions about that stuff, I get to ask him. So it's real neat.
Through all of that stuff, what are some lessons that you've learned, how to love your wife? Because, we hear all the time, God loves us so much, right? And we're supposed to kind of shine that or be that mirror to our wife in that way of God's loved me so much. That's why I can love how I do. For you, what are some lessons of that for you in your life and in your marriage?
Yeah. So I remember when I first got married, I learned super quickly, how selfish I was, how much I wanted to do. I wanted to go play basketball. I wanted to go hang out with my friends. I wanted to go shooting or go snowboarding, do this or that. And knowing those, knowing your spouse's love language is super important, I think. But also thinking about it that way. I once had a guy tell me you shouldn't get married unless you know that you can love your wife like Christ loved the church. And so thinking about that, I was man, it puts a lot of pressure on me. And I was already married at the time. So I was thinking about it and I was I need to be less selfish. I need to be more like Christ in this setting. So, yeah.
And to leading out of that right there, in loving her, it's so important, number one.
Yep.
But how can you make sure there's a balance there? You're not overbearing, but you're leading properly. I think sometimes we can almost sometimes smother, right? Smother our wives in the sense of we're maybe doing too much, right? You could see it that way. But where do you find the balance in that of, not being overbearing in your leading, but also leading the way God has called us to lead?
Yeah, I think the way not to be overbearing is, knowing that my wife has other people to talk to other than just me about her faith. I think that's probably the most important thing. Even though I work at a church, I can lead her in our marriage, but I don't have to be her go-to for everything. There can be definitely a female that she can look up to ask questions, and whether she's comfortable asking me or that person, I'm not going to take any offense to that at all. But I think that's super healthy. I think it's just kind of how Men of Iron does the protege and mentor thing. It's just like that for your spouse too. So
I want to touch back on, you said it earlier and kind of mentioned it again. What is the value that you've been seeing really in having that couple that's a couple seasons ahead of you? Because my wife and I just started doing that as well.
Yep.
We heard it. One of the Iron reps that works here, Scott, he told us about having this a couple that's ahead of you that can pour into you, but then having a couple that's below you that you can also pour into, because they're struggling probably the stuff that we went through or whatever the case in our lives. What's the importance that you've seen of that? Because you mentioned it before, and then you talked about having your wife having connections outside of the marriage as well, just to be able to help and create that balance. Like, what is that? What is the importance of it, and how has it helped your marriage?
It is. It's actually helped a ton. Yeah, I just know how dumb I can be with my marriage sometimes. Like, I'll tell a quick funny story, but I remember this was at Men of Iron group at LCBC, but I think it was my wife's birthday, and I got her a gift, right? And yeah, she'll laugh at this story now, but she wasn't laughing then, I promise. But I got her like a necklace, right? And it was like one of those necklaces that you can look in and see a picture. But I didn't know 2 years ago I got her that same necklace. And so I remember telling Kevin Wisher that. He was like, dude, you need to look at her Amazon shopping cart. And I was like, that's some really wise advice. That's like some practical advice right there. Yeah. But I was like, man, just telling that to a guy makes me feel better, because he was like, yeah, I did the same thing when I was your age. And he's like 10 years older than me. So I'm like, if I can ask him those questions and feel comfortable doing, and men aren't comfortable like just putting themselves out there and asking questions, it's just absolutely huge knowing that like I have someone there to ask those questions. So
just in that story alone, this is what popped to my mind.
Yep.
Like, conflict comes up in marriage.
100%.
Like, you're going to go through stuff.
Yep.
It's not always, it may not be that golden road with the flowers and you're jumping through the field. That's not marriage. So when stuff arises like that, tough situations, tough conversations, how do you approach those? Number one. Number two, how do you keep it Christ-centered the whole time? And then how do you get to a resolution?
Yep.
Like those three stops.
Yeah. So I would say the first thing, when tensions are high, like in a conversation with my spouse, I think the biggest thing is for both of us to stay calm. Is like, it's been huge for us. LCBC has talked a lot about speaking like truth with grace. And sometimes that's obviously hard when you're angry or you're upset or you're sad. So I think that's like an important key to try to start to frame that conversation for healing. I think also praying is definitely huge in that. I think praying probably first, like if you're going into that conversation, and then truth with grace, because like you can speak honestly, but your spouse still knows that you love them, even if you're feeling like a certain way. And then the third, I think it's really a little bit of like self-reflection, because oftentimes when I'm in the wrong, it's oftentimes because I'm selfish. Like if I'm being honest, it's like, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it my way. But no, I should be doing it either her way or the way that the Lord wants me to, because that's going to be glorifying to him, you know? So it's oftentimes in marriage, we fight about little stuff, and then we look back and we're like, that was stupid. That was so dumb, you know? Yeah. Like small little chore stuff and things like that. Yeah, there could be some bigger things that arise, and I think it's even wise if like bigger things do arise to maybe ask, maybe go to counseling, or honestly, like bringing like the church into it, and like just seeing like maybe what would your pastor do, or what would somebody else do? Maybe it's that couple, you know, just asking them for advice, because like some of those things, they've already been through it. And so like they could be a quick fix, or it might need a little bit like of a deeper level of healing. And that's why I recommend maybe counseling. That's
really good. I think kind of give you a little bit of piece of one of my stories. Like when me and my wife were first together, we had this huge fight. And right now we've been married now for 6 years. I don't remember it, but I do remember it came to the point where I had to look at her, and we were fighting. We were going back and forth on something. And I don't remember what it even was. It was probably something, the stupidest thing. But looking back on it, I can remember there was one point, and it came to me. I love you so much. I'm not here to hurt you. Like that's where like it came to, like, no other words need to be said. Like, I love you so much. I don't know what this is about or what the root of this is, but like, I'm sorry. And I don't want this to be like how this continues on. And I think like, if we can go back to how much God loves us, I have nothing to fight about with my wife.
Exactly.
And I need to show her that I'm the leader of that house. I am that husband. I'm supposed to emulate that love. And if I'm not doing that properly, how can I expect her to do that as well? And I think that's like, even in fights and bickering or whatever, I can go back all the fights. I can't remember, times we bickered or whatever the case may be, but I can remember like how low it almost seemed that I had to go
Yep.
to get to that point. I'm like, why am I even doing that? Like, and I think that's so important in conversation, because communication is huge in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the next thing I kind of want to roll into, of like, how do we properly communicate with our wives? Because I think sometimes it can be very like, military, like do this, do that, do this, do that. But it needs to be like kind of what you said before, a little bit. We have to put love in that.
Yep.
There has to be truth, but it also has to be honesty. There has to be grace in there. There has to be like, how do we do that? How do we communicate properly with our wives?
Yeah, I think it's something that I'm still trying to figure out, like in my marriage, definitely a little bit. But I think it's just, being open and honest up front is a huge, like, something that I wasn't good at. It was like, my wife just wants to know, like, when I'm going to get home, like from church or from work. And I wasn't the best at doing that. So it's just like, it's really just setting your expectations, I think, like up front. Like, she was very clear, right away. She was like, just text me when you're going to get home. I just want to know when you're getting home. And like me right away, I was like, no, but it's like, she's only doing that because she loves me, And so knowing that, it's just respecting that boundary. So I think it's really, setting that expectation and then communicating your boundaries. Like, what would you want me to say? How can I best support you? Things like that, I think, are huge in a marriage. Just knowing, like, hey, how do you need me to love you this week? Like, just knowing what our week looks like. Even sharing a calendar, that's huge.
Game changer.
I was so against it, but it's honestly been a game changer, because she knows where I'm at, and that's like clear communication.
Yeah.
And it's a third party. It's an app doing it for us. So I think that's absolutely huge. And the way that we communicate too, it often tells like how we feel about our partner in that specific day or week, so like if I'm doing a good job communicating, she's going to know, and she's going to feel super loved, and vice versa. So
I think it's like so important to be consistent in it as well.
Yeah.
That's sometimes where I fall a little short. I'll be completely transparent on it. Is just sometimes work gets busy, life gets busy, and you're running at 1,000 miles a minute. I don't take the time to stop and say, hey, I love you today.
Yep.
And that can go so far. That can go for miles just for taking the time, and it takes you 2 seconds to do so.
Yep.
So I think it's so important to have that. What would you say, and this is something that I think I really want to kind of hit hard on, is what do you think about if guys are out there missing the mark? Like they're aware of it.
Yep.
I'm not being that husband. I'm not being that leader, or they're failing. They feel like they're failing, that they're not that husband that they feel like what we've been talking about, what God has called us to be. What would you say, or like, how do I get to that? Like, what are the steps that I need to do to get back to being that leader that God has called me to be in my household?
I think that's a really good question. I think the first thing is finding somebody that's like a step ahead of you for sure. I think the Men of Iron, just a little backstory. I know you know this, but for our audience, I think just like, the Men of Iron group has kind of like changed the dynamic of how we do men's group. And it's shaping how men become better husbands, leaders, fathers. But that doesn't happen by accident, right?
Yep.
And so I do think it's maybe seeking somebody out, like a spiritual advocate, a mentor of some sort that is a step ahead of you, because you're gonna try to emulate what that person is, right, in your marriage. And so if like somebody's maybe like feeling in the dumps about how they're leading their household, I think finding somebody that you see that's doing a good job, absolutely huge. Obviously going to church, finding those people, we can't just wake up one day and just be like, all right, I'm going to be a good husband, Yep. But the Men of Iron stuff has been absolutely huge for our church. I've seen guys be more intentional about how they love their wives. There's this one guy, his wife's birthday was happening, and he was just figuring out, like, how do I like just love my wife in a way that Christ would love her? And they've been married for like 5 years, but this was like, I think a week after we were talking about family when we were doing the 5S, he showed me a picture. He bought like $50 bouquet of flowers and these big balloons and this I love you thing, and wrote her an intentional card. I was like, dang, dude, setting the expectation high.
Yeah.
So I've seen people grow in that, and I've seen there's another guy. He's been very intentional about communicating with his wife better, like not blowing up. And I've been walking with this couple for a little while, but I've seen him just grow a ton, and the way that he leads his kids, but also the way he leads his wife. He's just being like more intentional of how he does stuff. And his wife like wants that. So it's like there's a hunger for that too. So
I think that's so important just to be aware of stuff like that.
Yep.
I think as guys, we can be very oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just go through life and we're just we don't notice things, but being intentional in that
Yep.
and taking those things seriously because they do mean a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They do mean a lot to our wives.
Yep.
And that might not be like you were saying a little bit before about love languages, like certain things are better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And like for my wife, it's just that special time that I spend with her. And actually quality time.
Yep.
Sometimes I can be very like, oh, well, we sat on the couch and watched a movie. Like that should count, right? Well, that doesn't count, Colton. Like I've had to come to that realization that doesn't count. Like spending intentional time, having date nights, going out, watching them, going to the movies, going to dinner. And we have a 9-month-old son now.
Yep.
So it's definitely a lot different. So it's finding a babysitter, making that time, but being very intentional with my time, with my wife has gone far beyond what I could have imagined.
Yeah.
Because it started to change our marriage and getting a couple ahead of us that we can go to and be like, hey, I'm struggling in this. Like, can you help us?
Yeah.
Like some advice, what you would do, what maybe you've been through. And I think that's something to encourage as well. Like you were saying, find someone that's ahead of you. And I think sometimes as guys, that's super vulnerable.
Yeah. And
to actually do that, to be like, hey, like I'm struggling. What would you tell a guy that may be scared to be vulnerable? Because I know, like you mentioned, some of the Men of Iron stuff, we get vulnerable real quick.
Yep.
And those small groups and talking with each other. What would you say to a guy that may feel like he can't go ask someone or doesn't know anybody to go ask?
Yeah, I think like if you don't know someone to ask, best place to go to probably for that is church, because we want to see people grow, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. There's like a bond for these Men of Iron groups. I don't know how it's like at every church, but I know at like our campus, there's like a bond. It feels like a brotherhood almost. And so like if somebody's struggling in their marriage, we've seen people struggle, and there's been guys just like coming around them. There's this guy, James, and James, he just went through like an accident, and we've seen, the guys from group just care for him, call him intentionally and talk to him. And so like, it sounds kind of like weird in a sense, but guys love other guys. Like you need other guys around you. Yep. And they just want to see you grow. They want to see you succeed. Nobody wants to see your marriage fall apart. People want to see like the highest potential that God has given you. And that's been absolutely huge, I think, for our group. And I think if guys are maybe afraid to seek out, I would just say, just like take a chance, trust God in 6 to 12 months and just see how he's going to grow you in that time. Because honestly, when we accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, we're taking that chance already. Like we're saying, all right, I'm changing my entire life to follow you, right? And so if we're going to do that, we're going to be a better husband, a better father, a better leader in the church. I think we just need to take a chance. That's all I would say.
I think one of the biggest things is like to summarize all that is to be accountable.
Yeah.
Like that accountability piece is huge. Because if we get guys around us that believe the same way we believe, that have the same ambitions to be closer to God and helping push us towards that, I need those dudes. That's why it's one of our core pieces of Men of Iron is friends.
Yep.
Like we need those dudes. So there are guys out there that are actually probably yearning to have someone
100%
tap them and say, hey, can you like help me?
Yep.
And I think sometimes we get nervous or we're scared, but I would highly encourage to go out there and find that dude.
Yep.
One last question for you. What do you want your legacy to be? We talked about husband today, right? But I want you to think for yourself. Legacy is something that goes beyond us. You're investing so much time in being the next step director at City, right? And pouring into these guys. What's the legacy that you're trying to leave behind when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I've never been asked that question, so it's a great question. If it was me personally, I don't care what legacy I leave. I just want to be like a faithful servant of what Christ has entrusted me with. All right. So I do think like that's pouring into a little bit of like the next generation, but I'm pretty young. I'm 23. So there's guys that are ahead of me that I know, because of what we're doing at church, it's helping them become better fathers and husbands. And that just makes me happy. Like that itself is a legacy. Like the more that we can partner with parents, partner like me specifically with like fathers and husbands, like I know the church is going to be stronger in 20 to 40 years because of like what we're doing today. But ultimately it's nothing because I do, obviously it's all like of Christ. And Men of Iron obviously is a Christian organization. We base everything off of Jesus. So Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I want to leave a legacy at all. I just want people to look back at Christ and say, man, I've seen God show up in my life in these different ways.
I think that's huge, because so many times we can think, I want these accolades so people know me once I'm gone.
Yep.
But if, for me personally, the legacy that I want to leave is I'm just pointing people to Christ.
Amen. Yep.
They can look at my life and say, man, I saw his life and what God actually did in his life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the legacy I want it to be left.
Absolutely.
Nothing about me.
Yep.
I mean, nothing about me. I have the Brandon Lake hair, rocking it out. It's nothing about that.
Yep.
Right? I want it to be about I pointed people back to Christ. And I think the role that you're doing and what you're doing at City is amazing. Like, keep it up. Word of encouragement. Like, keep it up, because we need men like you in the world pushing people closer to Christ. Like, that's the legacy that we want to leave, is pushing people closer and closer in whatever avenue that may be, whether it's them being a better husband, better leader, better in their workplace, whatever it is.
Yep.
Is there any closing thought you want to give today to the guys listening, maybe about, being a husband, maybe about being that leader, maybe any of those pieces that we talked about today?
Yeah, I think just like if I had to say one final thing or encouragement, becoming better doesn't happen overnight, obviously. It's going to be a slow progression. Interesting enough, I have a smaller group of young adults, men that we meet pretty regularly, and they're not a part of Men of Iron, but I quizzed them on the 5 F's, right? I told them rank themselves based off of one of my conversations with you. And a lot of them were saying 6, 7, and my encouragement was all of us are at 6 or 7. Sometimes it's going to feel like we're at an 8 or 9. I don't think we'll ever achieve that 10 until we're in heaven. But yeah, we're going to have these mountaintop moments in each of those 5 categories. And I think faith and family are probably the 2 most important ones. And so it's I can have a 6 or even maybe a little bit lower in those categories, but I want to strive to keep those 2 at the front of my priorities each and every week. So those are the 2 most important things, practically speaking, I think, that we can just keep growing as followers of Jesus.
Man, I love it. Well, Andy, thanks so much for coming in today.
Absolutely.
And chopping it up on the podcast with me. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Men of Iron podcast. Make sure you go down in the description. We have all of our links for our store, for our base camp materials. If you want to do some of the stuff that Andy's been doing at LCBC, maybe that's Anchorman, maybe that's Game Plan. All those things are on our website. Go check those links out, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Men of Iron podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. At Men of Iron, we exist to change a culture one man at a time, and we'd love to have you partner with us. So go to menofiron.org to see how you can get involved, or donate at menofiron.org/donate.